So, welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today it's my pleasure to introduce you to Carol Finizza. Carol has a passion for storytelling ever since crafting articles for her college newspaper. She was a former sports writer for the Orange County Register and a regular contributor to Orange Coast magazine. She's the author of the Surf-Vival. Geez, that's a play on words there. Look at that. Survival Handbook for Land and Sea, A Girl's Guide to Life at the Beach. That sounds very interesting. And the Murder on Hollywood Beach is Carol's debut novel in the Messy Girl Murder series. Her latest book is Murder on Hollywood Beach. And here to talk about that and so much more is Carol Finizza. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Carol.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm so thrilled to be here with you.
Well, I'm thrilled.
Exciting.
I'm thrilled and excited to have you here on this St. Patrick's Day, where you are wearing green and I am wearing some shade of green. But Carol, I always ask people the same question as we begin these conversations. I'm curious to know, where does your story as an author and writer begin?
So the story begins on Hollywood Beach. Big mystery, right? You mentioned something when we were talking about backstory, like how do authors find that story and then lay it out, put it in words from start to finish. And so my backstory a little bit, how the impetus of this novel started a while ago, and it was like the perfect storm. So my husband had been diagnosed with cancer when I learned that my daughter was an alcoholic. And it was, just a horrible crisis in my life. But because I'm like a glass half full kind of person, what I couldn't control in my real life, I tried to figure out a way to control in my imaginary life. And so I envisioned this character, Amanda, that was sort of really inspired by my daughter's situation. And from there, I spent a weekend on Hollywood Beach. It's this beautiful little beach south of Santa Barbara. And I started crafting, and I think all authors can relate to this, is what if? So what if this girl who's struggling with her own crisis in her life, she's been kicked to the curb, she's had, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And what if she's finally getting back on her feet when her ex-husband's wife is found murdered on the beach? And it was a crisis that I saw unfolding in my own life with my daughter and my husband. And in long hours in waiting rooms at doctor's office, I started to put together this story based on this girl, very smart, very well educated, but for drinking, made all the worst choices in her life.
Mm-hmm. So that's, in a way, you're using writing, obviously you're following your curiosity, which I think, most authors, I think curiosity is the superpower of most authors. But you're using it to like create a world that you can control. And it sounds like it's almost therapeutic, for you.
I think like not having a whole lot of experience with the disease of alcoholism, I was like the great problem solver and trying to solve the problems for my daughter and hitting the wall every single time, trying to do research to find a way out of my husband's cancer, hitting the wall. And I could create this character that was seeing light at the end of the tunnel, was finding a way out, and it was therapeutic. I cannot tell you, and every author will know this, is living in their imagination is sometimes easier than living in real life. And you can set up these obstacles and you can figure out you can figure a way out for the character. And
Right.
even though this character is kind of a ditzy, Bridget Jones, Nancy Drew, this is not a hardcore, gritty, Patricia Cornwell, Stephen King mystery. It's kind of a fun mystery, but if you read it, you'll see it's very poignant in parts. Well,
Yeah.
to me it is.
Well, I want to take a few steps back and just really understand when did you realize that you had a talent for writing and a talent for storytelling? I mean, how far back does that go?
So my first job out of college was a sports writer, and I knew nothing about sports. I honestly have to admit, I'm not very athletic, but I love sports. I mean, that is like my passion. But so I went into the first little paper I worked for was a little weekly in my town, Dana Point. And I went in and I had a clip file from college. And I said, oh, I want to said to the receptionist, I'm going to apply for a job as a reporter. She goes, oh, well, just wait here 1 second. I'll be right back. The editor of the paper, Keith Thursby, who is a brilliant sports writer worked for the LA Times his whole career, came out and he said, I didn't know Keith at the time, and said, yeah, so what would you like to write? And it just popped in my mind, sports. And he said, okay, when can you start? And I said, well, now. So we went into the editorial room and I started working on little stories, Little League baseball and high school football and really innocuous kinds of stories until eventually getting a job at the Register and writing more in-depth stories, really feature stories on sports people.
How did you handle sort of not really, being a fan of sports, but not knowing much about them, and turning that into a job where you're writing about them? How did you do that?
Do I have to reveal all? Okay. So Keith was a great editor. And really, this was his first real job as an editor out of college. But I had a handy little guide called the LA Times. And so I read all those articles. And one of my journalism teachers in college said, write copywriting, copy whoever you love, copy their style, write like they write, and until you really find your voice. And eventually it'll come. So that's with Keith's help and my handy tool of using the LA Times, I kind of got it. And I don't know if I was a terrific sports writer, but I loved it. It's so much fun.
So as we continue our trip into the past, I want to go even further. Like when you were sort of in grammar school, did you know that you had a talent for writing? Did you know that was, something you were interested in, or did that come later on?
No, I was always a writer. I dreamed of being a writer. I wrote the school play in 6th grade, and do
you remember what the play was?
Oh, it was so silly. Of course I do. I mean, it's like my first success as a writer. So
in 6th grade, your first success. That's fantastic.
It was great. Oh, it was great. My best friend, who's still my best friend, pushed me off the stage when I was announcing. Anyway, it was based on Puff the Magic Dragon. Can you believe it? And it was a contest. It was a contest between the 2 6th grades. So we all had to write, whatever version we imagined of the story. I can't really tell you how that story unfolded, but I just remember that was the title. And they did it.
I love it. I love it. So that's your first taste of success. And was there no going back after that?
There was no going back, but it was a bumpy road, I gotta tell you. I was not, I mean, in junior high, I was a horrible speller, I've got to tell you, and I don't think I was any better with grammar. And I, one of my electives was creative writing, and teacher came and said, Carol, I'm really sorry, but you may consider doing something else. And,
Wow.
yeah.
It's interesting because so many authors I talk to tell me about, that fifth grade teacher who saw the potential in them and encouraged them to write. And it sounds like you had the opposite in middle school.
Yeah, I do think I had the opposite. But, one of the things I guess is I've always pushed through those kind of like negative things. Grew up in a house with 6 kids and a very chaotic childhood. And so it's sort of like somebody was always saying no, and I was always saying, yeah, but I can do that. Honestly, I think about when I walked into that first job and said, I'm a sports writer. I'd like to write sports, not knowing a thing about it really. And,
I think, there's a few characteristics of writing and being an author that I think are kind of must-haves. Obviously, the first is curiosity, and we kind of talked about that. You were curious, sitting on the beach and thinking about sort of an event unfolding and creating this world that you can control when so many things in your life were really just outside of your control. But you follow your curiosity there. It also takes a lot of vulnerability, which we haven't talked about so much. Maybe we will. But there's this idea of persistence that is so critically important as a writer and an author, because you hear no. I mean, you heard no from in middle school. You hear no from your parents, and and I mean, it's one of the favorite words in our household. But you've got to persist through that, because you're going to hear no through agents. You're going to hear no through publishers. But that persistence is, I think a lot of authors think, hey, I've got the talent to do this. But the big question in my mind is, do you have the persistence to be able to see it through to the end?
Yeah, I think it can be a very demoralizing. Any writing that you're exposing yourself to the public can be demoralizing, but truly you have to push through that. And going back to what you said, persistent. So I was rejected many times, and only during COVID did I pick that novel up that kind of had been sitting there. Real life gets in the way of, a lot of different things, and say, hey, well, maybe this, has a chance. Maybe I could, update it, rethink a few things and see where it goes. And a lot of it, I reached out where I hadn't before. I reached out to some really good friends that were authors and said, hey, can you tell me what was your path? What did you do? And one of my really close friends, Nancy Boyarsky, 9 novels, said, hey, I'll introduce you to my publisher, see where it goes. And that's how this unfolded. But for so many authors, they put it in the drawer and they never do anything with it because they've been rejected so many times. And
yeah, no, I mean, it's a tough, it's not for the faint of heart. And I always say, I'm an avid runner. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes,
it
truly is.
But what I love about the writing community is that those, people who have been successful in it are usually, there's exceptions to every rule, but they're usually so willing to share with you their knowledge, their path, their story. It's a very generous characteristic. Generosity is a characteristic that I find in many authors.
Oh, we're idiot optimists. Okay. We're willing to give it all up to anyone. it's, again, it's with the exception of a handful of people, just like anything, just like in sports, athletes or movie actors. There are a handful of ultra successful people. The others are just eking out this, living, writing one book after another. And we're really not. And I really stress this. Nobody, I don't even know if there are such people that go into writing to make a lot of money.
Right.
And in the off chance that you do, wow, that's so great.
Right.
Yeah. But it's the writing community is so generous because we're all struggling. And the one thing I will, if I might say, is the people who aren't generous, who aren't like giving or telling their story to you or sharing their 3 chapters with you, ones who are hoarding their book, no one can imitate your art. Nobody. They can't, just like me trying to recreate a sports article from the LA Times. We can't. It's just, it always comes out in our own voice, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's just fascinating. Just the generosity in the community is fascinating to me. But I think, you're around like-minded people who kind of see the world in a slightly different way. I think that's another authors have a superpower with curiosity, but also kind of seeing the world just a little bit differently than other people. And I think the same thing about comedians, we kind of see the world in just a little different way that is just ridiculous enough to make other people laugh and have some kind of an emotional reaction to it. What I'm curious about was something you said before, kind of sitting on the beach and this kind of your mind wandering, the story unfolds. Does that ever get annoying to the people that you're having these experiences with? I mean, do they ever find you like being distracted or just like kind of taken outside of the moment just a little bit?
Writing is a solitary thing, right? So you're not, and really, I guess a really important thing is to be with somebody who's also a big reader or a writer. My husband at the time, who passed away from cancer, he was an economist. He was about as far away, an economist with an imagination.
Okay.
The dismal science, right? They call being an economist.
I like to have an accountant with an imagination, especially when they're doing my taxes. But continue.
I'm with you. I haven't yet done them yet. Yeah, no. But so I think if you're not with somebody who appreciates that craft, because there's no one who can help you through this. Yeah. Really, it is a solitary job.
Yeah, no, I remember one time I just finished the final edits for a book that my editor had given me. I was on vacation, and I'm like, my wife is like, can you just not write anything during our vacation? Because she knows that I'm kind of like, when inspiration hits, it just hits, and you gotta do something. But also, writing is my way of relaxing sometimes. You talk about this world. It's a world I can have control over. I can create. I can find myself in. I can escape in. But I was on that vacation. I went to Catholic, so I went to church. And we're in Cape Cod, and like this, the guy must have been 90, the priest, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, what would happen if he just dropped dead? Like, what would happen? Like, what would we do? How would we react? And then I'm like, well, what would happen if we found out that he was murdered? And then all of a sudden, like, I had to leave and go home and just start outlining, what this could have been. And that became the second book in a series that I was writing at the time.
Oh my gosh.
But it just happens. And sometimes people don't get that that's kind of how our minds work a little bit. And it's, but it does, it does take us out of the moment. It leads to funny moments too. I remember when my kids were younger, we have triplets. They're about to turn 20, but when they were younger, I would drive them to school every morning on my way to the train station, because I was working in Manhattan at the time. And I would say, hey, can one of you text me the following line? Because I would think of things in my head as we were
Oh my
driving.
gosh.
And I would,
Yeah.
and they're like, 10, 11 years old. And I'm like, I'm texting them. I'm like, Maggie, text me, knife found under bed, with blood on it or something like that. And she'd be like, what is the matter with you? Why can't you be like all the other dads? And I'm like, sorry, this is what you get.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. No, you get into the story. And this is true. I really, honestly, this. Once you get into that story, you're consumed. You can be so consumed. You can't stop. And there's a penalty with stopping, don't you think? I mean,
sure.
Kind of, because once you get back into it, you're all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you write every day, Michael?
I do some kind of writing every day. So whether it's, for this show, I write very detailed, notes about each episode. So that's that. I do personal journaling. I'm not working on a book now, but I always have ideas marinating. Mm-hmm. And then, for my real day job, it involves a lot of writing. Because in addition to interviewing authors, I interview people for marketing purposes, and I'm always writing their stories up for my clients. So, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not doing something, where I'm not exercising that muscle somehow.
So I was a marketing director for 22 years.
Yeah.
For a big company. And it's the same, it's just the same, just a creative kind of process, different subject, different style, but you're right in the middle of it, of writing and every day.
So tell me about your fascination and your love of the beach, because I think we share that in common.
Oh, okay. So I grew up in Los Angeles, but my family had a beach house on this little beach in Dana Point, Beach Road. And when I was 18, the family, all 6 kids, we all moved down to the beach house. So I've lived here in Dana Point from that point on full time. And I live across the street from the beach. I love the beach. I mean, it's in my, I don't think I could ever live away from the beach. I thought about it, but.
Yeah. I live in Connecticut. My town's on the water. I'm not on the water, but I couldn't think of living like in a non-coastal area. Even if I go to the beach twice a year in my town, it's like I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be that far from it. So I could never imagine living in the Midwest. Like I've lived in the Los Angeles area for a little bit. I've lived in Connecticut for most of my life. I was born in Florida. And my grandparents lived on Pompano Beach, which is just north of Fort Lauderdale, where I spent, so many weekends of my life. Funny thing is, I don't love sand.
No, I don't either.
I don't love sand. I hate sand, but I love the beach. Like it's the atmosphere, it's the smell, it's the palm trees, it's the breeze. So long as I don't have to clean sand out of my feet, I'm happy.
It's the open space. So I grew up on this beach and right on the sand, and you go to bed every night with sand in the sheets. There's no way around it. Barefoot, So eventually I wanted to be where I could see the ocean. That was my, dream. And but no, the idea of living right on the beach was not something I wanted to do.
Yeah. So I have some questions for you. These are questions that I ask almost everybody. I do mix them up a little bit. I call them my hot seat questions. They're not terribly difficult, although sometimes people have some challenges with them. Are you up for some questions, some specific questions?
Oh, I love questions.
All right. And this is the one many authors have a hard time with. What was your favorite TV show as a kid?
Oh, my favorite TV show.
Or some of your favorite TV
Oh,
shows.
Dick Van Dyke
Okay.
and I Love Lucy.
Oh my gosh. So Dick Van Dyke, hysterical. I think it still holds up today.
Yeah.
Him, Mary Tyler Moore, just a funny show. Was he in advertising in that show, or what? Or maybe I'm getting him mixed up with
advertising.
He was, right? Because I know
think
Darren from Bewitched was also in advertising.
Oh, maybe he was in sales or something. I don't know.
He had some interesting kind of job.
Yeah.
Right. And he
said, and then Dick and I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
I love those shows.
I remember just growing up, because I'm a little older than you. No, just growing up, I would see my brother and I, when we'd be with my grandparents in Pompano, there were 3 TV channels. I mean, they didn't have cable.
Yeah.
So, but they had a channel, and I Love Lucy seemed to always be on. So we always watched I Love Lucy. And fun fact, who played Ethel? Vivian Vance. Vivian Vance had a country house in the town that I live in, and I run by it all the time. It was just up for sale. And it's a cute little country house on this old country road. But that's how they marketed it. Previously owned by Vivian Vance.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They were so cute. That was so cute. Yeah. My dad was in the movie business.
Oh yeah.
Everybody, if you live in Los Angeles, you're somehow connected to the movie business. So my father, I was on the sets as a kid growing up of so many different TV shows. He did The Big Valley and Mannix and TJ Hooker.
Oh, I love TJ Hooker.
Yeah.
TJ Hooker. It's so funny you mentioned TJ Hooker, because I'll be in my office. I have a home office in addition to the studio where I am now. And I'll just go, and my wife will hear me, and I'll just start singing or humming the theme song. I'll go, dun, 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 dun. And my wife is like, why are you humming the TJ Hooker theme song? And I'm like, I had no idea you even knew about TJ Hooker. Like, we have completely different tastes, but come on, Billy Shatner.
Oh, yeah.
William Shatner, Adrian Zmed.
Oh my God.
As his little and then Heather Locklear, young Heather Locklear, before she got, Melrose
Poor
Place
Heather.
and Trouble with All the Rock Stars. She was Richie Sambora, Tommy Lee. I think she had a rough go of it with those bad boys. Those bad boys. TJ Hooker. So did you meet William Shatner or no?
Yeah, I met William Shatner. I met Heather Locklear. So my brother, of course, there's nepotism in the movie business. So my dad did TJ Hooker, and my younger brother did 90210 or whatever it was.
That is you're talking my language right there.
So that, at the same time, Heather Locklear did both shows.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat and had lunch with Heather. She was such a sweet person.
Yeah.
Came and sat down with us.
Yeah. She was, she did Melrose. And
Melrose Place.
And then she did LAX.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why I know all of this. I really don't know. But I love 90210 because those kids were the same year in high school as I was. So I got to graduate with them. I got to go to college with them. We had our first jobs together. We felt the same heartbreaks. All right. So there's that. Okay. Second one. So if we were following you around as a teenager, what albums or cassettes or CDs would we find you listening to? Who were you listening to back in those days?
Oh my God, I was such a dork. I was listening to the Beatles, of course.
That's
the
not
Beach
dorky.
Boys. Well, and then I love show tunes. So all the
that can be a little dorky.
It's totally dorky. Oh, totally. I mean, look at I was the 70s,
Sure.
60s, 70s. And that was a wild time. And I was so far removed from wild. It's no one. And that's why writers write, they get into their own world. That other world was dangerous.
Well, I was talking to someone the other day, and she said to me, she's like, you don't write to become one of the cool kids,
Yeah,
you know, which is
exactly.
so true. Which is so true. I mean, I was, I gave up playing baseball to do musical theater. So it's like
Wow.
that was a shock to my father. But next thing, one day he sees me like, wearing my little baseball uniform. Next thing he knows, I'm wearing tights as a knight in
Oh
Camelot.
my God, that takes courage. That takes really good self-esteem.
Yeah, well, I learned it along the way. I didn't necessarily have it, but I learned it. So the Beatles. And did you watch that Beatles documentary that was out on Apple TV? Or is
Yeah,
it Disney? I can't remember. It's one of the two.
I think it was Apple. I just watched it a
It
couple of
was
weeks
8
ago.
hours of kind of behind the scenes and a
Yeah.
lot of Yoko knitting for some reason. That's what I
Oh,
that's what I
Yoko.
remembered. Yoko knitting.
Yoko. That what a trip.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny, funny. All right. So aside from writing, what activities make you happy?
I am an avid golfer. So I
Really?
told you, yes. Yes, I've even gotten a hole in one. Can you
No
believe
kidding.
it?
No kidding. I've
A
done that in
hundred.
mini golf.
Exactly. No, this was 174-yard hole in one.
Okay.
Rolled right into the hole. Yeah, I love golf. I'm a golf fanatic.
Do you remember what club you hit that with?
I do. It was my 5 wood.
A 5 wood.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, it sounds better than it is. Okay, so a 5 wood, great course in Mission Viejo, 174 yards downhill.
Mhm.
So look, I hit just a perfect little shot, banked it, and it just rolled right into the hole. And it was so exciting.
Were drinks on you in the clubhouse after that?
Drinks were on me, but I've got to tell you, it was so anticlimactic because I was like expecting, like, I was going to the bathroom and fixing my hair. I thought, oh my God, they'll want to take my picture. The newspaper will be here any minute. And these guys, I drug all my witnesses with me into the pro shop, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, you got a hole in one. Okay, where's that paperwork? And it was so non-exciting. Yeah, but I did go on a pub crawl that day in our
Nice.
towns.
I
Yeah.
one of my books is entitled Winning Streak. It's about a golfer who wins all four
Ooh.
majors in the same calendar year. And as he's, finishing up, it was the PGA championship. That used to be the last of the four majors. I know it's different now.
Yeah.
I'm a golfer as well. But as he finishes the last match where he wins his fourth major, his father's his caddy, suddenly has a heart attack and dies. So the book is, I mean, it's around golf, but it's not a book about golf.
Yeah.
But there's a scene in the book where it's a flashback as he's kind of coming up. He hits a hole in one, but no one's there to see it. And
Ah.
no one believes him. But there was like a little lesson I put in there. This is my attempt at writing a deep book, which is kind of a curveball when you're known for writing comedy. But but the lesson there was just because you didn't see it happen doesn't mean it didn't happen. So it was kind of like a little lesson on faith
Yeah.
in the
Oh, I
middle of
like
this
it.
like deep story. But oh God, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's the tree falls in the forest
that's exactly it.
metaphor, right?
That's exactly it. I came very close to hitting a hole in one once.
Ah,
But and then I three putted. So go figure.
exactly.
So how close was I? All right. So golf makes you happy. How about this? How do you feel when you're looking at a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen, depending on how you write?
uh, ooh, stressed a little bit
Interesting.
stressed, a
Interesting.
little bit stressed, like
Tell me why stress.
a little bit stressed, like a blank, you put the blank sheet, right? That first word on the page. I think it's a little, see, I think maybe you're more of a free flowing writer than I am. Um, I've got to get out of that habit of editing myself in my mind before I put the word on the page. So yeah, I do feel a little bit intimidated by that blank sheet of paper.
All right.
Once I
Okay.
get started, you know. another story. But
yeah, you got to overcome that stress. But yeah, once you get started, and the words start coming, you get in the zone. I find that with when I'm writing work for clients, and not necessarily when I'm writing creatively, but if I'm like, I run focus groups. So if I'm trying to summarize, the big themes of a project, that first sentence, I will avoid writing for days. So I can empathize with you somewhat there. How about this one? What lessons about writing do you feel as if you learned the hard way?
Yeah, I think, something, the lessons about writing that I think the most, what I would say to any writer like me, I would call me a struggling author, who waited too long to launch myself into this world. It's follow your heart. It's a passion, and you take the word can't out of your vocabulary, and don't let the obstacles of what other people say or think get in your way.
Yeah. There's that persistence again, right? That you have to kind of work through. Last up here, and this is the one most people have. Some people have a harder time with than others. But if you were able to write a letter to your younger self, maybe it's that younger self in middle school whose teacher was encouraging her to maybe follow a different career path. But you could pick, how young you want to be in the situation. But you could write a letter to your younger self from everything you know today. What kind of advice would you give your younger self in a letter to yourself?
Well, I would say follow your passion. Don't let other people derail you. Don't let fear. I think this is heavy, what I'm going to say. Okay. Are you prepared for this heavy thing?
I'm sitting down.
It's a good thing. No, I really think follow your passion, and don't let fear. Fear is the devil, really, to me. And be fearless, and don't let the negative voice derail you from pursuing your dreams.
Yeah, got to silence that negative voice somehow, because it comes to all of us, right? I mean, it is, it is the reality, no matter how successful you are, no matter how many words you've written, that voice will creep into your head, and you gotta exercise it somehow. Exorcise it, I should say.
Exercise it.
Not exercise. You don't want to give it more strength. You want to throw holy water on it, and
yeah, give it the boot, right?
That's right.
That is so funny. That is hysterical.
Well, your latest book, Murder on Hollywood Beach, is out. Where, if people, I imagine so many of my listeners are going to want to buy Murder on Hollywood Beach.
Absolutely.
Where can they go and do that?
Anywhere books are sold.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Love to hear that answer.
Yeah.
And then if they want to learn more about you, Carol, where can they learn more about you? Do you have social media accounts or web page?
I have social media, but actually, yes, I have carolfinizzaauthor.com. Pretty standard. And then same Carol Finizza on social media.
All right. Very good. Well, Carol, this has been a fun conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and with us, and for admitting that you were on the set of TJ Hooker. That is something I will never forget. And I wish you all the best with this book.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I loved every minute.